Hi all, Adi here from Hans & Johns. As always, thank you so much for clicking on the video. I'm in deepest, darkest North Yorkshire. I'm actually on the North Yorkshire moors. I'm in a little village called Lastingham, and I found this church on Google Maps. It's called St Mary's. They've got a crypt, I read, on Google Maps underneath the church, and it's apparently one of the only Norman ones in England, so I'm so excited. I'm just hoping that we can get in there. Apart from that, I really don't know very much about it. It's got a beautiful graveyard, so we'll have a look around the graveyard and then we'll go and explore the church. I'm genuinely really excited. As I mentioned, today we're in the beautiful village of Lastingham, which is on the edge of the North Yorkshire moors, and I'm visiting what I think is one of the most remarkable and historic churches in England, St Mary's. Now at first glance it looks just like a peaceful country church, but beneath it lies over 1300 years of history, going all the way back to the very early days of Christianity in England. Now to understand this place, I think I need to go right back to what happened just after the Romans left Britain. And that's a 15th century font we've got there, and a beautiful little model of the church. And I love that there's gravestones and even some sheep in the churchyard. Somebody obviously put a lot of time and love into making that piece. Christianity first arrived in Britain during the Roman times. By the 4th century there were already Christian communities here, but when the Romans left in the early 5th century, Britain was left vulnerable. Now over the next couple of centuries, Anglo-Saxon settlers arrived, and many of them were pagan. In many areas, Christianity faded away. And I love that the church has this extensive map of the cemetery, so it's lovely if people are looking to research the family trees or they're looking for a specific grave. Somebody spent many hours, I imagine years even, listing all this. Absolutely fantastic piece of work. Now, Christianity didn't disappear completely. It survived in places like Ireland and parts of Western Britain. And from those areas, missionaries began travelling back into the Anglo-Saxon England, and they wanted to reintroduce and spread the Christian faith. And one of those missionaries was a man called Cedd. So in the year 654, Cedd, who was trained at Lindisfarne, founded a monastery right here at Lastingham. At the time, this was remote wilderness, and the Venerable Bede later described it as a place more suited to wild beasts than to men. So that gives you an idea of just how isolated this place must have felt. So Cedd built a small monastic community here. The buildings would have been made of timber, simple wooden structures, nothing like the stone church we see today. But this site quickly became very important. In 664, Cedd attended a hugely important meeting in Whitby where he acted as a translator. Now this meeting was to decide whether or not the English church would follow Celtic or Roman customs, and especially how to calculate the date of Easter. So not long after that, sadly, Cedd died of the plague, and he was buried here at Lastingham. Now this made this site particularly sacred because it was the burial site of a saint. Within about 60 years of Cedd's death, a stone church replaced the earlier wooden monastery church. His body was moved and reburied beside the altar. But over the centuries that followed, Viking raids and general upheaval likely damaged or destroyed much of what originally stood here. Now, by the time of the Norman conquest in 1066, the original monastery had been completely gone. But in 1078, just a few years after the conquest, a new Benedictine monastery was founded here, and the very first thing that they built was this stunning crypt. And what makes this crypt so extraordinary is that it survives almost completely intact. It's one of the earliest Norman crypts in England, and it's extremely rare because it has a full nave, side aisles and a rounded apse at the east end, almost like a complete underground church. And as I walked down these steps, entering this space that was built nearly 1,000 years ago, it was really overwhelming, but in a really nice way. Now, the crypt was built over the traditional burial site of St. Cedd, and it was likely intended to be a shrine or a place for pilgrims to visit. For reasons we don't fully understand, the Benedictine monks only stayed here for about 10 years before moving on to York, where they founded St. Mary's Abbey, but the crypt remained. Now, above it, the rest of the church slowly developed over the centuries. And over to the right here, we will see what would have been the original entrance. So the pilgrims just to the right, that looks like a small window. Well, it is now a small window. That would have been the original entry into the crypt. And this 10th century cross shaft, so both sides of this cross shaft have interwoven Viking design, but also with the key design, which is typical of late Saxon crosses. So this suggests that the monastery did not remain deserted, but it actually survived the Danish conquest. And I just popping the light on here because it's quite dark. Oh, just get my hand out of the way there. And look, that's just absolutely stunning. I've never seen anything that old up close. This is usually the type of thing you'd see in a museum, and I love how you're getting a little bit of a sparkle from the light there. And this is a coffin lid. I couldn't find any information on that. I'm really sorry. And then just over here at the window, that's what I was talking about, which would have been the original entrance into the crypt. I couldn't find a huge amount of information about this ancient burial bier, but what it would have been used for is to carry bodies into their final resting place before modern coffins became standard. And I have done a bit of research, couldn't find out an awful lot, but it's quite rare apparently, and it would have dated before the Reformation. The 9th century Saxon crosshead, so 2 pieces have been identified as part of the crosshead of a great Saxon cross. So both pieces are reported to have been found near the east buttress of the porch in 1838. Now, this would have been a monument of quite extraordinary proportions, and it's estimated to have stood over 20 feet high, and it may well have been the main standing cross in Cedd's monastic enclosure. And then in here, locked away, there was these panels which look like they're made out of wood. So I don't know if they're Viking or Saxon. I literally could not find out one single bit of information, but I think these bits on the floor may possibly have been windows from the pre-conquest monastery. Sorry about the dodgy camera work. I'm trying to get it to focus and get it in between the railings there. So they may well have been windows. And then there was another piece of beautifully carved wood here. Again, there was literally no information about this either, and I couldn't find out any either. Sorry about that. If anyone does know what it is, please do let me know. And this was my favourite thing down here. It's 10th century, it's a cross shaft, and it's got an interwoven pattern, but also with the key design, which is very typical of late Saxon crosses. So this again suggests that the monastery didn't remain deserted, but actually survived the Norman conquest. Sorry about the dodgy camera work here, just trying to get round the other side so you can have a better look at it. Absolutely exquisite. And then up on the pillar here was another piece of beautiful stonework, but again I couldn't find any information about that. So if anyone does know what it is, please do let me know. And this looks like another coffin lid. I have seen quite a few carved coffin lids, and they're usually Saxon origin, but I could be completely wrong. Now this is an absolutely beautiful, what they call a hogback stone, and it dates from the mid-10th century, and it's a prime example of Anglo-Scandinavian sculpture from the Viking Age, and it's believed to have been a grave marker for a high status individual. There's a very interesting fragment here from a large stone cross which is known as the Anna cross, and that originally would have stood high up on the moors, but it later broke, and a section of it is now preserved down here in the crypt, but it has been replaced. Now I think most of these stones down here date directly back to the 7th and 8th century. So they're physical evidence that this was such an important Christian centre long before the Normans arrived. This has got engraving on it, but I just couldn't read it. And to the left of that as well is what I think is another coffin lid, but there was absolutely zero information about either piece. And as we head back up above ground, the main part of the church that we see today was developed between the 11th and the 15th centuries. The core structure is Norman, but over time aisles were added in the 13th and the 14th centuries. It's a beautiful stained glass window. The bell tower that we went into in the beginning before we went down into the crypt was added later in the 15th century, but if you look carefully you can see the different architectural periods in the stonework. And this little square here I was intrigued by. I asked the church warden and she said they believe that it is an old scaffolding mark. Love this little quote. It's a building that's evolved gradually, layer upon layer of history. But inside here, one of the most beautiful features for me is this vaulted ceiling. It gives the church such a sense of height and elegance, which otherwise it's actually quite plain. This is a lovely stone lectern, which was added in the 19th century. And the church really needed a lot of restoration, and in 1879 the work to restore the church was funded by a Dr. Sidney Ringer and his wife in memory of their daughter Annie Ringer, who died young. The architect J.L. Pearson carried out the restoration work. But the most striking result of that restoration is in the chancel, with the beautiful stained glass windows that were made in Florence by an Italian craftsman, including Ulysses de Metes. And that is the young Annie Ringer, that first window. So they're representing several different scenes of life: Christ, the Nativity, the Crucifixion, and the Resurrection. And the church warden had told me as well that these were very recently had a lot of restoration. They were cleaned and restored. So that's why they still look so vibrant. And Dr. Ringer actually invented the modern day saline drip. So we have a lot to be thankful for to the Ringer family. Just such a sad story about him losing his daughter at such a young age. Makes St. Mary's at Lastingham so special. It's not just its age, although that alone is totally remarkable. It's the continuity. The site has been a place of Christian worship since 654. That's nearly 1400 years. From a wooden Saxon monastery to a saint's burial site to a Norman crypt, and then to a medieval parish church to a Victorian restoration. And still today, it's an active place of worship. And when I stood in that crypt, in the quiet, stone-vaulted space, just standing where monks once prayed in the 11th centuries, and obviously you're standing above the resting place of a 7th century saint, so that continuity is very rare. So next time you're exploring the North York moors, please don't just pass through Lastingham. Step inside St. Mary's and go down and see that beautiful crypt. It's one of the oldest surviving Norman crypts in the country, and the story of a missionary who helped shape Christianity in England. So it is one of the most significant places I have ever visited. I just took a quick walk around the graveyard. It was quite treacherous, I'm not going to lie. I think they've got a huge rabbit population, and there was loads of warrens and tunnels, and yeah, it was quite uneven and difficult to walk on. But I just came up to this corner to have a look at the beautiful snowdrops. It's wonderful to see the first signs of spring, because over here in England, I know many of you watch from across the pond, we've had a very, very wet winter. So the snowdrops are wonderful to see. They give you a little bit of hope that warmer days and brighter days are ahead. I'm going to wrap the video up here. I honestly think that is one of the most extraordinary places I've ever been. The age, the Vikings, the Saxons, the Normans, oh my God, and then a lovely modern day story about Annie Ringer. Blown away. I'm absolutely blown away, as always. I always worry sometimes that I'm going to run out of places to visit for the channel, but that's never going to be the case, is it? Anyway, thank you so much for watching from deepest, darkest North Yorkshire. I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel a little bit more, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link down below. And I'll also put in the details for the church if you want to make a donation, which I've done today. But if you want to make a donation directly to the church, you can do so via the information below. So yeah, I'll see you for the next one. Might be a Hunt, might be a John, who knows.